Laws and principles in design. So all permaculture designers should be aware of the fundamental principles that govern natural systems. These are not innumerable rules, but we can use as a set of directives, taking each case as unique, but gaining confidence and inspiration from a set of findings and solutions in other places and other times. We can use the guiding principles and laws of natural systems as formulated by such people as Watt, Odom, Birch, and apply some of them to our consciously designed ecologies. So that's from the Designer's Manual, Bill Mollison. So he's asking us to think about natural systems, so we're going to start looking more so into natural systems to try to utilize that as inspiration for what we may be able to do in our designs. So there's thousands of designs. I could not possibly show you every single thing that someone in permaculture has done, but what we want to get an appreciation for is keep building this appreciation that their inspiration comes from nature. So then you utilize that to make sure your thing. And remember, as I said earlier with the Steel Like an Artist, think about the term you like, go to Google Images, search images, make like a bucket, right? So I make a folder on my laptop and I look at the images of natural building, and if I like that picture, I dump it in my bucket. When it's time for me to go do my natural building, or I want some inspiration, or just want to feel good, I can go look in my natural building bucket with all the nice pictures that I like, all the things that make me inspired to give me ideas. So when it's time for me to do my building, that's what's going to help me to be, inspired. So principles are different from dogmas in that they are no penalties for error, but only learning from error, which leads to a new evolution. So in permaculture, we don't really get into we say principles, but we don't hold you to them. So you may use some of the principles in your design and not all. You don't have to use all. You may use all. Probably, to be realistic, all of them can apply. But there's no error or penalty in permaculture. Dogmas are rules that are intended to force centralized control, often by guilt. And it is obvious that every such rule or law represents a failure of the social system. It is never too late to fail and never too late to adopt sensible principles for guidance and to throw away the rule book. So this is kind of the quote that gives the basis of permaculture as an educational system being very open, or what's called open education. It doesn't have rules. You can do what you like. You can present your plan in which way you like, in what's comfortable for you, as long as you're presenting it in line with basically don't hurt nature, don't hurt people, and create a surplus. That's all the rules that we kind of have. And we don't even say they're rules, it's more like ethics. So, Gaia and permaculture. The earth, okay, so this is about Gaia theory. The earth as a self-regulating, self-constructed, and reactive system, creating and preserving the conditions to make life possible and actively adjust to regulate disturbances. What does this mean? Nothing's free, okay? Everything you do has a consequence, and everything you do, you must pay for. Okay? So if I want compost, I have to put in energy, mine. I won't get it. It doesn't just miraculously make a big pile. And it doesn't a miracle go from that pile to the garden, right? So if I'll put in the energy to move the compost is now have the energy to make the food. And I get something back for something put in. So everything has a cost. That brings up a policy of responsibility, to take responsibility for ourselves. The role of beneficial authority is to return function and responsibility to life and to people. If successful, no further authority is needed. The role of successful design is to create a self-managed system. Okay? The system should take care of itself after a period of time. So at the beginning, yes, I will put in energy to set up the system, but it should be relatively self-managed. This is what Bill's trying to help us with. Be careful about making things too complicated, okay? Making things that they only work without you, and if you walk away, it just collapses because it's only neat, right? So our orchards or our food forests, these things are very self-regulated. The life intervention principle. In chaos lies unparalleled opportunity for imposing creative order. Be really careful about making things too linear, too set, too fixed, because then you lose options. If we walk into the food forest and you see it, some people can say, well, it's chaotic, things everywhere. Yeah, and that gives me a lot of options to choose. I can choose light, I can choose chop and drop, I can choose to do nothing. Many more choices than I have when I walk into like the mandala. The beds in the mandala are really fixed. You don't have a lot of choices there. That choice has been fixed. So he's trying to ask us to think about not tying yourself down too much. and then you don't have as many opportunities to make change. The law of return. Whatever we take, we must return. Nature demands a return for every gift received, or the user must pay. This is how we create pollution. We don't return. We're not cycling, and we end up accumulating. So everything is a two-way street. The bacteria gives the minerals, but the plant gave sugars. There's a two-way street, okay? The mycelium may have moved the minerals, but at the end of the life cycle, it gets to recycle the tree. Everything goes in two directions. Chinese could describe it as the yin and the yang. Every object must responsibly provide for its own replacement. Society must, as a condition of use, replace an equal or greater resource than that used. This is our concept of sustainability. If we're using more resources and the future won't have any, that's the definition of unsustainable. If, for instance, everyone decides to stop procreating, well, good, the human race will go extinct. Isn't that great? Is that the future? They'll say you're being unresponsible by not taking responsibility. Doesn't mean the opposite, that we should have 20 kids either, right? We should have responsibility for the gifts. We have the gifts of every person in your family that came before you for thousands of generations have brought you to this place. Is it for you to give it away? To throw away that genetic gift that was handed down by people working really, really hard. So it's not for us to have 20 kids. Might be not for us to have 0 either. So we have to take that. Watch the movie Idiocracy. All the smart people didn't breed. Guess what happened? All the dumb people kept breeding. So there you go. The basic law of thermodynamics. So I would like permaculturalists to spread, not to disappear. So the basic law of thermodynamics. All the energy that enters an organism, population, or ecosystem is accounted for as energy that is stored or energy that leaves the system. So you cannot create or destroy energy. Okay? You have no choice. It either enters and it leaves, but you can just utilize it while it's there. Energy can be transformed from one form to another, but it cannot disappear, be destroyed, or be created. So we can take energy in the form of biomass, turn it into compost. We can turn the compost into vegetables, and we can turn the vegetables into us. And we can turn our manure back into a tree. But the energy just flows through. It's just transformed. It's not created. It's not destroyed. There's no more or less of it. We can densify energy into a more compact form, but we didn't make energy, and we didn't destroy energy. So the basic law of thermodynamics, the total energy of the universe is constant and the total entropy is increasing. What does that mean? Things break down. Remember, we were discussing maintenance. Every day, this table is deteriorating. If we just leave it here for 100 years, it will no longer be here. It will just collapse. These pots will fall down and will be broken. That's okay. We can regrow the bamboo. So the energy is deteriorating, but also we can regrow. So entropy is dispersed energy. It becomes unavailable for work or not useful in the system. For instance, we did the biochar today. We did create and transform, right, the rice husk into carbon, but a lot of energy was dissipated through heat. We could have captured that energy in a more efficient way and done something else with it, like maybe run a steam turbine if we had enough technology. So how do we understand entropy as a designer? So just ask yourself these questions. It's something to ask yourself on the design. When I'm designing my systems, then I can say, this system I want to build, how can I best use energy before it passes from my site or system? Wind, water, sun. It's coming in every day. It rains, the wind blows, the sun shines. How can I utilize it? How can I best utilize it before it leaves my system? Entropy is the natural phenomenon that energy always like the universe is expanding because energy goes to the peripherals. It goes to a lesser state. So there's a constant energy going to a lesser state. And so we see that in like the instance of like if we, I don't know, if we build something, the Eiffel Tower, over time it will collapse, right? That's entropy, that's breaking it down. So we try to work against entropy by developing systems that take the waste and pushing it back in. Yeah. Yeah. That's called from source the source of the energy, to the sink, energy trying to always sink into a lower state. What do? If we do a swale, like water, we try to slow it down. We put a speed bump, the swale. When we put the speed bump on contour, we spread it out, and then we sink it in. We hold it in our landscape. The longer that we can hold water in our landscape, the higher the potential yield, because the energy stays in our system, and it densifies. So that water then can be turned into the tree. The tree can get the biomass to turn into compost, which I can then put into, say, the vegetable, right? But that starts with slowing down the energy and keeping it in our system, trying to stop, because energy wants to go to the sink, so the water goes downhill to the ocean. That's P.A. Yeoman's source to sink. There's a topography. The rain falls. It all wants to go straight downhill to the river, out to the ocean. But we want to, in permaculture, hold it back, so slow it down, spread it out over the landscape, and sink it in. So that's a key concept in permaculture. Catch and store energy as much as you can. Passive energy retention is how we do that. We do that in our homes. We do that with water. We can do that with solar, with trees catching solar energy. Make energy take the longest path. So when we see those, remember I showed you the dream farm that had how many times the energy came from the sun and had to go around all those systems till finally it came out? That's what I want to do. Make it take the longest path. That's described as source, the source of your energy, to where you sink the energy. For us, we want to sink the energy into something that we can sell, like a mango. So how do I get the sun into the mango, and how do I get the mango to the market? That's the source to the sink. So that brings us to Birch's 6 principles of natural systems. This is the basis of ecology, or what you might call the principles of ecology. Nothing in nature grows forever. Everything dies. The oldest tree they've ever found is only like 1,000 years old. So they've had trees on the planet for 1 billion years, but no tree is older than 1,000 years. Trees die, they regenerate. Trees die, they regenerate. Everything's like that. Continuation of life depends on biochemical cycles. If we don't cycle our nutrients, or we keep sending all of our nutrients and minerals to the ocean, eventually life at that land point will die. There's no more cycles of biochemical, which in this instance, guys, they're talking about the periodic table. All chemicals are only a combination of the elements on the periodic table. The probability of extinction is the greatest when the population is either very high or very low. So not enough people to breed or inbreed, the population would collapse. Like if we kill all the elephants, there's only a few elephants left, well, we can't recover. And or if we have too many in any population of animals that we've seen, that we get extinction events because, for instance, we ate all the food, we went into winter, there's nothing to eat, and we all die because there was no food through winter, right? This type of thing. So us right now, the human population, going from 7 to 9 billion people over the next 20 years. Ecology would tell us is a very risky state. Species reproduction is primarily dependent on 1 or 2 key factors within the organism and its environment. So if those 2 things aren't really right, things are off. Like for instance in Africa, they've linked that women's birth rates are tied a lot to stress. So if they take off the stress of the child dying, then the birth rates decline, because the woman, in what you might call the id, or the animalistic part of our brains, men and women, same thing, the stress causes increased fertility rates. If the first child lives, the fertility rates decline. Okay? So very key things that we can hone in on. So our ability to change increases faster than our ability to understand the consequences. This is why people, like in permaculture a lot, are against GEOs. We don't necessarily know the consequences of gene splicing weird stuff, and then what happens. For instance, at one point they tried to gene splice, and they did it. Good thing it didn't catch on. They made blue strawberries, and they were like fluorescent blue, like really, really fluorescent blue strawberries. And they tested them, and nobody liked it. But in order to make the fluorescent blue strawberry, there's a bacteria that grows on the strawberry, which is the same bacteria that grows on the leaf of a tree, which makes it rain. That's called tea dust, which forms the nuclei of rain. And they gene spliced that bacteria. Now, if that went awry and every one of those bacteria mutated and then no longer formed tea dust, would it stop raining? See how this was really a dumb thing to be playing with without knowing the known consequences? Maybe it stops raining in the world because we messed up the bacteria that makes rain. Not very smart, right? So these are the type of things we want to try to talk about so that we can tell people you should not do this because you don't know the consequences. Living organisms are not only a means, but an end. Meaning that this is a concept in permaculture we want to utilize like we're doing our worms today. We don't want to kill them. We want to understand that they have natural functions and that we can utilize the natural functions, like let the worm process the waste to create a product, or for us, a yield. So some tips. For more information on biochemical cycles and understanding that, check out books by Lovelock, Volk, or Living in the Environment by Lovelock and Volk, and that's a basis of Gaia theory or the Gaia hypothesis, which I highly recommend. And that is the basis that creates what we know today as modern ecology. So what does this all mean for designers? What can you do with it? So it's really nice to think about the basic or principles of ecology. The systems that we create. So now we're starting to move into wanting to design energy productive or yielding systems. The systems that we create should be as long as possible and require the least amount of maintenance. So I want the energy to move in my system for a long period of time, from this to this to this, but I don't want to create maintenance. Okay? So think about when I talk about, I shared one with you the other day, that within about 3 to 4 months, I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, about 3-4 months, the first dinner at Raktamachat, everybody will welcome to Raktamachat dinner, I'm going to serve lobster. Because I'm going to grow lobster here. But as I told you, with anything that we grow, we need to feed it. So I have to provide the food for lobsters. So I have to think, like, what does lobsters like to eat? So these nice freshwater lobsters, I want to grow them, but I need to feed them. Well, they eat crustaceans and stuff. So I could feed them snails. Because in my rice fields, we get a pest, the rice snail. And they breed prolifically. And they're really, really interesting animal because they can convert almost at a 1-to-1 basis whatever they eat into biomass. So they take carbohydrates or grasses and they turn them into protein. So if I have Napier, I can feed Napier to snails. I can feed snails to lobsters. I eat lobsters from Napier. I can't eat Napier grass, sure can't eat a lobster. So this is a thing that we look at kingdoms. 1 kingdom, 2 kingdoms, 3 kingdoms, and all of a sudden we have densified, right, the nutrient into the yielding product, okay? And it's very interesting that humans really like and value, typically value nutrient-dense food. But be also really careful. You've been marketed heavily in the last 100 years to start to pay for, with your hard-earned money, things that do not have energy density. Write down all your foods that you like and then do a little chart on the side and really ask a question. Is this nutrient dense? Is this energy dense? And how much do I have to pay for this non-nutrient and energy dense food? Why do I believe I should pay that for that? Shouldn't I be paying for nutrients and energy? Shouldn't that be the value of things? If we want to have a resource-based economy in the future where we do not use capitalist systems and we base everything on resources, how would that have value? If it was no nutrients and or very energy dense, I pay a lot of money for this, but I don't get very much. Sun-fueled systems. So remember, I said I'm a farmer of the sun. Sun drives all of my systems, okay? It's the root. Sun-fueled systems should produce their own needs and the needs of the people managing them. If your system costs you money, at the end of the day, you just got an expensive hobby. And don't go around talking about other people who have hobbies that you don't agree with, right? And say my hobby's better than their hobby. Both of you waste money. You waste energy. Think about building a system that produces more in its life than it took to construct and for the people servicing it. If you can't even get enough energy out of your system to provide for the food it takes to work on it, that's unsustainable. That is the definition, okay? So in permaculture, we're looking for building systems that produce more energy than it took to construct them. Same thing in natural building. We put energy in our home, but over the life cycle of the home, it will produce me more energy than it took to construct that home. That's sustainable. The system should store and conserve more energy in its lifetime than the energy it takes to construct, okay? Just basically. I can put energy to construct something. I can buy nails and put in this table. and I can cut down the bamboo, and I can use my energy to construct it. But the service that the table performs for me over its lifetime should be a better service than what it took to make. And if not, it's not sustainable. If I build this table, and every year I have to build a new table, and a new table, and a new table, and a new table forever, that's kind of a waste of time. If I can build this table and it stays here for 50 years, 100 years, that's a pretty good table. I like that. This table, guys, is not as good as that table. That table's over 100 years old. And that table will be here another 100 years when this table has disintegrated in front of our eyes. Both are from trees. One is bamboo, one is wood. Now, it doesn't mean we should go down and cut down old-growth forests to make tables that last a long time. But if the table lasts for that long, 200 years, because we take care of it, that's sustainable. We could have regrown that tree 4 times. Do you understand? If we cut down a tree that takes 50 years to mature, we only use the product for 10 years and tear it down, that's not sustainable. This is all we're talking about. So, permaculture insights. I want to think about permaculture. I want to get that permaculture mindset. How do I see permaculture? Well, work with nature instead of against nature. Don't fight natural systems. You're going to spend a lot of energy. The problem is always the solution, right? It's fine in permaculture to talk about a problem if you talk about it in how I'm going to fix the problem. If you only want to talk about the world has problems, but you have if you've not developed the sense to talk about changing them, right, by doing, then that's just kind of degrading. It's going to mess you up on a long period of time. The problem is a solution. Say what your problem is. Let's fix it with a solution. The least change for the greatest possible effect, call that lazy permaculturalist. I'm not going to intervene in any system. I want to find the point at which I get the most return for the minimum work. The biggest bang for the buck, right? If I'm going to spend some money, yeah, I had to go with Alan the other day, and I don't like leaving Raktamachat. I hardly ever leave. In 5 years, I've left this place like very little, okay? And, but I'll go to town, and I don't like it, and I'll go to a store, and I don't like that either. But if I buy something, and I consumed, and I bought materials to build a system, the permaponics, that will create more energy in its life than the materials that I had to spend, including going to town in a car, using fuels, right, coming back, and he builds it, and that's going to make food for the next 50 years or longer. That pipe will be in the ground. It can be there for 100 years, guys, and make food. So the value of the pipe, so that was a consumption, but I created an asset. I took my consumption and turned it into an asset, not my consumption and made it into an expense. The least change for the greatest possible effect. And then yield is theoretically unlimited because, as we discussed, the amount of sunlight that's hitting Raktamachat today is just, we can't comprehend that number. It's trying to ask a question, what is $1 trillion? I don't fucking have any idea how big that is. Well, how much sunlight hits today? Well, it's an infinite amount. So our systems, we have an infinite ability to capture energy. That's limited by our imaginations and our work ethics. And everything's a garden. Where does the garden start and the garden stop? Why do we have to describe the garden over there? Why can't I see almost every single thing here as useful? So where's the edge of your garden, and why do we create it? Yeah? Why isn't everything a garden? Why don't we live in a garden? Why don't we walk down the road, right, in Bangkok, and why don't they line the street with mango trees? They would grow, and everybody would have free mangoes. Oh, of course, that would hurt the capitalist concept of selling mangoes, but you know, from a permaculture concept, if it's my place, why do I not see everything as a garden? Why? I mean, look right there, that's a coconut. Yeah? That's moringa. That's bamboo. I can eat them all. Yeah? Free food, right? Everything's the garden. You live in the garden. Permaculture as a design science. Basically, we start to see here. This is called a sandbox. You can do this. You can get some, if you're having issues, some people really like to graphically, not just paper's not good enough. I can't see it on paper, Bo. No problems. Man, permaculture is like little kid fun. Go outside, get you a pile of dirt and some water, and make a mud castle. Make a sand castle. You now can take, that's their design, and they laid it out to scale out in the mud, right? And then you can even do it on a slope if you wanted. And you could even pour water and watch the water go down your swales in your pond if you wanted. So we can build it to scale with parts and pieces, so no issues. But what is that? If I'm looking at that, how I describe what he did, it's a beneficial assembly of components, the components, in their proper relationships. So put your components you want for your lifestyle, and I can't make you, and I'm not going to try to go through all the things I think you should have for your lifestyle. You'll know those things, right? You're going to do your research, your analysis. But when you find out what they are, the relationships is more important. What does permaculture then do? Well, we can call that a creative descent or a peaceful revolution. If we go back to the book, right, that I showed you by David Holmgren, called Principles and Pathways Beyond Sustainability, David outlined the graph. He outlined the growth of the population. He overlaid our population growth over the peak oil curve. He gave us scenarios, techno-fantasy, green stability, right? Atlantis, and he called it peaceful revolution. When we have to live in future generations with more people with less energy per capita, we're going to have to learn how to get along in a peaceful manner. And these things, caring for the earth, caring for people, limiting consumption, that's our personal consumption, sharing our surplus, these ethics, right, are going to help us to live peacefully. And if we can't learn it now and share it to more people, which is your next obligation, to go out and tell more people about sustainability, about permaculture, so that more people can start to learn to do this, this is what we're going to do.